In an underground fight club, Carter, a confident and undefeated fighter, beats his opponent hard. He easily dominates the match, even dancing as he fights. After the effortless victory, he begins preparing for the next round. Carter has never lost in this fight club, so the crowd expects another easy win. But then, a quiet man in a hoodie walks in. His name is Dalton. As soon as Dalton takes off his hoodie, Carter recognizes him and gets nervous. Dalton is a former UFC middleweight fighter, banned from the sport because of his violent past. Carter refuses to fight him and walks out. Dalton wins a large amount of money without throwing a single punch, then calmly walks out of the club. Outside, a man who lost a bet on the fight confronts him in anger. Suddenly, the man stabs Dalton in the side. Dalton stays calm and asks if he's sure he put the knife all the way through. The attacker panics and runs away. Dalton heads to his car and sits. Moments later, a woman named Frankie approaches him. When she sees the knife in his side, she panics, but Dalton tells her to calm down. He calmly pulls the knife out himself. After tending to the wound, he asks what she wants. Frankie explains that she owns a bar in the Florida Keys called the Roadhouse. Lately, the place has been overrun with violent troublemakers, and the police won't help. She needs a strong bouncer to protect the place, and she believes Dalton is the right man for the job. She offers him $5,000 per week, but Dalton refuses and gets into his car. Still, Frankie writes her phone number and the bar's location on a piece of paper, hands it to him, and tells him to call if he ever changes his mind. Dalton has no home, so he sleeps in his car. In the middle of the night, a cop wakes him up and tells him to move. He obeys and starts driving. Dalton carries a dark past. During a UFC fight with his best friend, he lost control of his anger and killed him in the ring. That's why he was banned from the sport. Broken by guilt, he drives to a train crossing and stops on the tracks. As a train approaches, Dalton turns off the engine and waits for it to hit him. But when the train gets closer, he changes his mind and tries to start the car. However, the engine refuses to start and the train rushes closer. At the last second, the engine roars to life and Dalton moves, just in time. Still, the train slams into the car, completely destroying it. Somehow, Dalton walks away with only minor injuries. After that, he decides to give life another try and accepts Frankie's offer. The next morning, Dalton takes a bus to Glass Key, a small coastal town in the Florida Keys. When he arrives, he meets a teenage girl named Charlie. She's friendly and runs a small bookstore with her father, Steven. Dalton asks for directions to Frankie's bar. They help him and even give him a book for free. Later, Dalton walks into the bar. He orders a drink and sits down. At first, the bar seems quiet, but that doesn't last. That night, a group of bikers led by a man named Dell arrives. They start wrecking the place. Dalton doesn't react right away. He calmly watches as they destroy the bar. Finally, he gets up and walks toward them. He warns them that he's about to destroy their motorcycles, then heads outside. But he's not actually going to damage the bikes. He just wants the gang to follow him outside. When they do, he gives them a chance to leave peacefully. They refuse, and a fight breaks out. Even though he's outnumbered, Dalton moves fast and hits hard, knocking them down one by one. When the fight ends, he doesn't leave them behind. Instead, he borrows Frankie's car and drives the injured gang members to the hospital. Outside the hospital, Ellie sees that Dalton is bleeding and offers to help. He agrees, and she treats his stab wound. After thanking her for the help, Dalton walks out. However, other gang members wait nearby, looking for the right moment to attack him. But they don't get the chance, so they decide to try again another day. Later, Dalton returns to the Roadhouse. Frankie pays him $5,000 for the week and offers him a place to stay. It's an old houseboat she owns, but she warns him a crocodile lives nearby, so he should be careful. Dalton heads to the boat and starts making it a livable space. The next morning, Laura, a bartender at the Roadhouse, brings Dalton breakfast. She tells him she hopes he stays, because other bouncers didn't last long under the gang's pressure. Later, Dalton heads to the bookstore. He greets Charlie and asks for computer access. Charlie agrees and lets him use one. Suddenly, gang members show up and start attacking a nearby store. Charlie runs outside and yells at them to leave, but the gang ignores her and keeps breaking the store's windows. Moments later, Dalton steps outside. As soon as the gang sees him, they panic and immediately leave the area. Afterward, the gang heads to a yacht to meet their boss, Ben. They tell him about Dalton and how he's interfering with their operations. Ben's plan is to scare off every business owner in the area, including Frankie, and build a luxury resort. So, he orders the gang to deal with Dalton. Back at the bar, a fight breaks out between customers. Dalton tells Billy, one of the waiters, to handle it himself. He gives him a few tips on how to deal with violent customers. Billy walks up to the men and takes down the troublemaker. But then, the man pulls out a knife. As he lunges at Billy, Dalton steps in and breaks the attacker's hand. In the following days, Billy grows more confident, and Dalton continues training him. Dalton also approaches a waiter named Reef and gives him tips on handling troublemakers. He pairs Billy and Reef together, forming a team to keep the bar under control. Soon, the two start kicking out every troublemaker on their own, while Dalton sits back and watches. Later, while helping a drunk man outside the bar, Dalton spots Del and his biker gang again. They stare at him, but don't have the courage to attack, so they leave. Still, Dalton knows they'll try something eventually. The next morning, Ellie sees Dalton at a restaurant and walks over to talk. They chat, with a little flirting. She warns him to be careful, telling him the town is dangerous, filled with powerful people who play by no rules. Then she leaves. That night, after finishing his shift at the roadhouse, Dalton walks home across a bridge. He notices a car following him slowly. Suddenly, it speeds up and tries to hit him. He jumps out of the way just in time. The car circles back and tries again. This time, Dalton climbs into the back as it rushes toward him. The car ends up at the edge of the bridge, about to fall into the river. Del and a woman jump out just in time. Then the car plunges into the water with Dalton. Somehow, Dalton survives. He swims to safety and returns to the houseboat. But Del is already there, waiting with a gun. Del says the plan was to kill Dalton by the car and make it look like an accident. But since that failed, he's ready to shoot him now. Dalton asks for one last question before he dies. Del agrees. Dalton asks why the gang is so concerned about him. As Del lowers his gun to answer, Dalton acts fast. He kicks the table toward Del, attacks him, disarms him, and throws him into the water. Suddenly, a crocodile appears. Dalton rushes to help, but it's too late. The crocodile drags Del under. The next day, police search the area but find nothing. A local tells Dalton that crocodiles often hide their food, so the body may never turn up. Later, Dalton visits the bookstore. Charlie shows him a map of the town. He studies the land around the roadhouse and starts to wonder, why is the gang so focused on this place? As he steps outside, a man approaches and flashes a gun. He tells Dalton to get in the car because his boss wants to meet him. Dalton asks who his boss is. The man says it's Ben. Dalton then walks up calmly and breaks the man's fingers. Another man gets out of the car but doesn't dare to attack. Dalton tells them if their boss wants to meet him, he can find him at the roadhouse every night. Dalton then heads to the bar and asks Frankie why Ben is so focused on the place. Frankie says she's not sure, but believes it's about more than just causing trouble. Meanwhile, Ben is furious when his men return without Dalton. Moments later, his father calls from prison, but instead of answering, Brant throws the phone into the ocean and orders his man to get it back. Elsewhere, a man named Knox gets a call from Ben's father. The old man wants Knox to deal with Dalton. Knox agrees and starts making his way to the town. Meanwhile, Ellie surprises Dalton by borrowing her ex-boyfriend's boat and taking him out to a peaceful spot in the ocean. They grab some chairs and beers and set up a quiet place by the water. They sit and talk. Ellie starts asking personal questions, and Dalton realizes she's trying to turn it into a date. So, he stands up and tells her it's time to head back. Ellie gets confused and asks what's wrong with going on a date. Dalton says she wouldn't want to know about him, but Ellie already knows who he is and what he did in the UFC. Still, she says she likes him. Then, they share a kiss. Meanwhile, Knox arrives in town in a flashy Ferrari. He drives straight to Ben's place. He walks in and punches Ben as a greeting. He tells Ben that his father sent him to kill the bouncer at the roadhouse. However, Ben begs for one last chance to deal with Dalton himself. Knox agrees. Later, Ellie drops Dalton off at the houseboat, then leaves. Moments later, two cops arrive and order Dalton to come with them to the police station. They say they have questions about Del and how he died. Dalton agrees and gets into the car. Ellie sees everything and starts to suspect something's wrong. Inside the car, Dalton realizes they're not going to the police station, but there's nothing he can do. Soon, they arrive at a remote spot where the town's sheriff gets into the car. The sheriff warns Dalton to leave town or face serious trouble. However, Dalton refuses to leave. The sheriff then tells the cops to get him out of the car. They drag Dalton out and start beating him. Then the sheriff steps out and points a gun at Dalton, ready to kill him. Suddenly, Ellie shows up and slaps the sheriff. It turns out he's her father. She grabs Dalton and drives away. In the car, she explains everything. Her father used to be friends with Ben's father. father. After Ben's father went to prison, her father started working for Brandt, helping him take over the town. At the same time, Ben's gang goes to the bookstore owned by Charlie and her father. They burn it down to send a message to Dalton that they can hit anywhere, anytime. That night, Dalton is at the roadhouse, unaware of what happened to the bookstore. Moments later, Ben walks in. He sits across from Dalton and starts talking about his past. He pulls up a video of Dalton's UFC title fight, the one where Dalton lost control and killed his friend in the ring. Ben asks why he kept punching after he had already won. Dalton doesn't respond, but the question changes his mood completely. Ben then leaves the bar. Outside, Knox is waiting and Ben tells him to burn the place down. Knox walks into the bar with several gang members. He starts smashing tables, scaring customers, and grabs a woman from her date, forcing her to dance with him. Billy and Reef try to stop them, but Knox takes them both down. Some drunk men in the bar try to fight him, but they end up hitting each other instead. Chaos erupts. Every drunk man starts fighting each other. Meanwhile, Knox yells Dalton's name. Dalton, deep in thought about his past mistakes, doesn't react at first. But when Knox keeps shouting, Dalton finally steps forward and asks what he wants. Suddenly, Knox headbutts him, and a brutal fight breaks out. They clash across the bar. Then, a gang member grabs Dalton, holding him in place while Knox beats him. Soon, Dalton's friends grab Knox and hold him back. The fight pauses just for a moment. Immediately, they both break free and the fight spills outside. Knox feels confident and gets ready to finish Dalton, but Dalton doesn't want to continue. He turns and starts walking away. Ellie arrives and rushes to him, asking if he's okay. However, he ignores her and keeps going. He heads straight to the houseboat and begins packing his things. As he's about to leave, Frankie appears. She sees he's angry and apologizes for not telling him the whole truth. She explains that Ben is trying to build a luxury resort on the area. He's already bought every nearby property, except hers. She's the last holdout. Ben needs her bar to complete his plan, but he's out of money and deep in debt to dangerous people. If Frankie holds out just a little longer, Ben will not be able to pay his debt, and the people he borrowed from will end him. So, she urges Dalton to stay, since the town will be peaceful soon. However, Dalton ignores her and keeps going. She then asks if he's afraid of the gang. He answers, "Yes, I am very afraid." Then, he walks toward the bus station. But as he passes by the bookstore, he sees smoke. He rushes inside and finds it completely burned. Panicked, he asks a firefighter where Charlie and her father are. The firefighter tells him an ambulance took them to the hospital. This moment changes everything. Charlie was the first person to welcome him to town. Now she's hurt. Because of him, Dalton's anger builds, and he changes his mind about leaving. Later, he tracks down one of Ben's men, the same one involved in burning the bookstore. Dalton tells him he was about to leave, but after seeing the bookstore, he stayed. The man asks if Dalton was leaving because he was afraid of them. Dalton says he is afraid, but not of them. He's afraid of what happens when someone pushes him too far. He explains that when he gets angry, he can't control himself. That's why he killed his friend in the ring. Then, Dalton punches the man in a vital spot, killing him instantly. Nearby, he spots another gang member, the one whose arm he broke earlier. The man freezes, terrified, but Dalton doesn't harm him. Instead, he asks where to find Ben. The man tells him, and Dalton lets him go. The next morning, Dalton sees a dirty sheriff's deputy transporting a briefcase full of cash, money meant for a secret deal with Ben's backers. Dalton knocks the deputy out and takes the money. Afterward, he returns to the houseboat and begins preparing explosives. Suddenly, the sheriff shows up, so Dalton quickly hides the explosives. The sheriff tells him that Ben has kidnapped Ellie and will kill her unless Dalton returns the money. The sheriff begs Dalton to give the money back so Ben will release her. Dalton doesn't fully trust him, but he knows Ellie is in danger, so he agrees to return the money and asks where to take it. The sheriff gives him the location and they part ways. Later, Dalton steals Ellie's ex-boyfriend's boat and loads it with explosives. He drives the boat toward the meeting point. Inside, the sheriff smiles and tells Dalton that Ben would never kidnap his daughter because they're partners. But Ben interrupts and says he did kidnap her to make sure he got the money. The sheriff becomes furious and tries to attack Ben, but Ben's men hold him back. Soon, Ben realizes Dalton didn't bring the money. Enraged, he orders his men to attack. Suddenly, Knox approaches the yacht, but Ben doesn't want him involved, so he orders his men to keep Knox from getting on board. Suddenly, Dalton detonates the stolen boat, and the explosion causes chaos. Dalton punches Ben and his men, then rushes below deck, searching for Ellie. He finds her trying to break a window to escape. He helps her just as the yacht begins to sink, but they're not safe yet. Ben grabs Ellie and drags her onto a boat, fleeing toward the shore. Immediately, Dalton jumps onto Knox's boat and throws Knox into the ocean. But Knox grabs a rope and gets pulled through the water behind the boat. Dalton now chases after Ben. As Dalton gains on him, Ben turns his boat around and drives straight at Dalton, planning to ram and destroy his boat. Ben crashes into Dalton's boat, completely wrecking it. But Dalton manages to land on Ben's boat. Since Ben couldn't kill Dalton, he changes tactics. He speeds ahead and aims the boat directly at the roadhouse, hoping to destroy it entirely. Realizing the danger, Dalton and Ellie leap from the boat. Moments later, Ben's boat crashes into the roadhouse, ripping through the roof and leaving a path of destruction. Meanwhile, Knox swims to the nearby bridge. He climbs up, steals a car, and speeds toward the bar. Back at the bar, Ben is still alive, but badly injured. Dalton and Ellie swim to shore. Then Dalton heads to the bar and starts beating Ben. Suddenly, Knox arrives and slams into Dalton with the stolen car. Dalton gets up, shaken but okay. Knox steps out, and a brutal fight begins. They throw punches and slam each other into debris. The fight is intense. Both men take and give heavy damage. Suddenly, Knox pins Dalton down and stabs him with a sharp wooden shard. Nearby, Ben watches and yells at Knox to finish Dalton. But Knox doesn't like being told what to do, so he turns to Ben and snaps his neck, killing him instantly. Then, Knox turns back to Dalton. He lifts another shard, ready to strike. However, Dalton fights back. He pulls the wooden shard from his own body and stabs Knox with it. Then he grabs the second shard and stabs Knox repeatedly until he collapses, bleeding and barely alive. Moments later, Ellie and her father arrive. Her father tells Dalton that he'll cover for everything, but he needs to leave town immediately. Ellie also tells him to go, so Dalton leaves. The next day, Frankie and her employees begin fixing the bar. With their main enemy gone, they're determined to restore the bar and live in peace. Meanwhile, Dalton sits near the burned-down bookstore, waiting for a bus. When the bus arrives and he's about to board, Charlie runs up and asks him to stay, but he tells her he can't. At the same time, Charlie's father, Steven, finds a bag full of cash and realizes Dalton left it for them. It's the same money Dalton took from the corrupt deputy. Dalton leaves it behind as a gift to help them rebuild the bookstore and their lives. After saying goodbye to Charlie, Dalton boards the bus and leaves town. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of our future content.